Hey, good morning. My name is Gary Matsuoka, and we're here at Laguna Hills Nursery in Santa Ana. And today's class is on growing seeds. Now, I never grew seeds that much until there was a time about 12 years ago, 13 years ago, when we closed my parents' store. And before we opened this store, we were doing farmers markets for a few years, had no property really. And one of the ways we created more plants cheaply was to grow them from seed. And there's certainly a lot of worthwhile plants to grow from seed. So we learned a lot more about seed starting in those years than I did the previous 30 years I was at my parents' place. But we've always grown a few seeds. They're just, definitely cheap. And certainly you can get on the internet or look through catalogs and find seeds that you can't find the plants anywhere. There's a lot of neat stuff out there that opens a whole. Once you start growing seeds with these catalogs, there's a whole new world of plants that you can grow that you've never seen before. So it's pretty neat. So the seeds are interesting because it's essentially suspended animation. I mean, you know, there's no way an animal could ever do this, where like California poppy makes this little tiny hard seed and it can sit around in a dry desert for 400, 500 years. And then rains come and it sprouts and it grows. There's no way any animal can sit around that long. You know? So it's very unique what plants can do with that they have that survival mechanism of the seed. It could survive, asteroid hits on the earth and still get going again. So seeds, now seeds generally are made by the parent plant, and most of the seed is a storage of energy. So it's oils and starches that are stored in the seed. There's usually a seed coat around it. And one thing to know about seeds is they have a lot of survival mechanisms that you have to watch out for. So, like California poppies, the main thing is that seed has to be soaked in rainwater or some kind of water of some source really thoroughly for at least, they say either a couple weeks of rain or a couple inches of water. So unless it rains a couple inches, those seeds won't sprout. So if you throw California poppy seeds in your yard and it doesn't rain anymore, and you just water once or twice a week, they're not coming up this year. They'll come up next year after this rainy season we had was so wonderful that pretty much most seeds would sprout. Now the other thing about seeds is that generally in undisturbed ground uh, where plants have been growing, there's a lot of seeds in the ground. You don't see them by your eye too well. If you look in a microscope, you can find them. I mean, one of the strategies that some people were told is that you've got weeds in your yard, pull them, water them real good until all the seeds sprout, and then pull those out, and then you're good to go. Well, no, they said you'd have to do that about 12 times. Water the area, let all the seeds sprout, pull them out, water it again. There's still plenty of seeds in there, sprout at least a dozen times before you exhaust all the seeds near the surface. And there's more down deep. If you start turning the soil over, you'll bring more seeds up. So there's a lot of seed in the ground that, when one seed sprouts, it tends to put out some chemicals that stop the next seed around it from sprouting. So they don't all come up at once. That's something that nature does to make sure that there's balance. So some seeds do put out, like they say, if you plant sunflower seeds, don't expect any other seeds nearby to sprout. So sunflower seeds put out this chemical in the soil that prevents germination of the seeds around it. Um, the other thing about seeds, so one way, so on seeds that need lots of water, so on the California poppies, apparently there's a chemical in there that's got to be leached out of the seed for that seed to sprout. And only a certain amount of water over a short period of time will do that. And if they only don't get enough water in them, then that chemical starts building up again. So there must be some kind of slow ongoing process in that seed that creates that chemical that keeps it from sprouting, and then a short period of a lot of water will knock it out of there. No, and they need enough water to grow and flower again. So I think they're programmed to need about over an inch of water in the ground. Now, some other things we have to do on certain seeds. So most of the seeds in the temperate climate mean north of the tropics and south of the tropics, a lot of seeds were evolved to need a winter chill. So apple seed would be a good thing, a good example. An apple seed won't sprout uh, before winter; it sprouts after winter. So it needs that winter temperature to make it develop totally, and then it sprouts with the next heat wave. So if you sprout before winter, you're in trouble if you're in the temperate climate. It gets too cold. So if you want to sprout, so now to learn about seeds, you know, some of it can be intuitive, but you got to look it up. There's just no way you're going to know everything about every seed. So there's a lot of seed books, and certainly you can look on the internet. A lot of these propagation books will tell you this seed needs to be cold stratified. So if so, there's a cold stratification, and the temperature at which they need to be stratified, fortunately, is your refrigerator, not the freezer, the refrigerator. Uh, Plants, about 40 degrees, it's perfect for seed stratification. So what we normally do is get some, like say, have oak tree seeds, native oak tree seeds need to be cold stratified. So we'll put them in a Ziploc bag with a damp paper towel or damp peat moss or damp vermiculite, something that's sterile. Not You don't want compost in here. Compost tends to want to eat things. You want something that won't eat your seeds up or your seedling roots. So the peat moss or vermiculite, wet sand can work, although it's harder to handle. You put your seeds in there and put them in the refrigerator damp. And most winters, are at least 3 months. So generally we go 90 days. So So rose seeds, apple seeds, oak tree seeds. There's a lot of seeds that require cold stratification. Almost anything from the northern and southern climates, temperate zones, you can assume they need cold stratification, but not all of them do. But especially the woody trees and bushes, a lot of them need to be cold stratified. They need the cool temperatures to break down the chemical that's preventing them from sprouting. And then once it warms up um, and they get light. So light, so most seeds require light, not full sun. Most of them are buried, you know, slightly in the ground, and the sunlight still penetrates the ground that deep. So they do need light. They do need water or moisture. Some seeds don't need any light, which is interesting. So when I do grow oak tree seeds, and they don't even need it to warm either. I put oak tree seeds in my refrigerator, and usually around February, they're growing in my refrigerator. They're just growing. Total darkness, in cold. They once they get their chill they just take off and grow. So okay, so light and water. So generally, most seeds you'd want to bury them if they have any size at all. Say like a bean seed, usually bury them the same depth as if you stood them up, you bury 1 seed deep in the ground. Now, a friend of mine who was really into giant pumpkins, the seeds he buys for the world record pumpkins, sometimes, well, this was like 10 years ago, he would have to spend $200, $300 for a seed. So he wanted to make sure that he knew how to grow these seeds properly because, you mess up one, you're out a couple $100. So he'd buy, seeds from pumpkins that were 1,000 pounds or 1,500 pounds, and he would put them in all certain directions in the ground to see which way worked the best. And what he told me was flat. So when you bury your seeds, you want them to be flat. And what he says would happen was that the roots come out one end and the embryo with the leaves come out the other end. He says if you bury them straight up and down, the seed pops out and it's stuck to the plant. It pushes the seed straight up and it's stuck. The leaves can't get out of there. He's got to use his tweezers and try to peel off the seed coat without breaking up the leaves that are forming. So he says flat, which you would assume that a flat seed would fall in the ground flat, not straight up and down. So that's kind of interesting that he found that out. Of course, so some seeds are really expensive. You have to be careful. They're cheap seeds. You're just tossing. So light water. Um, so a lot of seeds on the surface of the ground now. When it's raining, it's so wet. You just leave them on top of the ground. You go to the tropics. You go to Hawaii or any of the areas that are in the tropics, and there's like 95% humidity. Seeds sprout on the ground. They don't need to be buried. You, you look underneath a lot of trees, and there's all these sprouts coming off. You can see the seeds sitting there, and it's just sprouting and growing. The air's so humid. So most seeds can be stored. You can figure 3 years is kind of average. So most vegetable seeds, 3 years in the package or in a dry spot. They always say keep it dry. Now our areas in our houses real dry. If you're in New Jersey or in Florida where the air is more humid, then they would put the seeds in a jar with they said powdered milk gives it the right dryness. So not bone dry, but not 95% humidity either. So here we just leave them in packages. Our area is fairly dry. Some seeds don't live long at all. So assume tropical seeds. In the tropics, always wet. The seeds usually grow right away. A lot of those seeds cannot last very long. We find that citrus seeds, if you were to take a seed out of a citrus, you got about a week to plant it. Cherimoya seeds, you got about a week to plant them. And even we found that milkweed seeds, if they've been sitting around a while, they don't grow. You got to be pretty fresh. So some seeds don't last very long. Now, when I was younger, my roommate and I, we'd grow raw peanuts from the seeds you buy at the store. But just be aware that a lot of the seeds at the store have been dried and stored so long that they're not viable. Like a lot of the bean seeds, lentil seeds, they've been sitting in those packages or in a grain elevator somewhere for years and years and years, and they're just not viable anymore. So watch that. The fresher they are, the better. Now, so a lot of these seeds are big enough that you can bury them. A lot of seeds are really tiny, like carrot seeds, really tiny. So what we usually do with the really small seeds, I mean, strawberry seeds, another one, you know how small strawberry seeds are. I've grown those. You kind of one way is get a plastic knife or a credit card and kind of scrape the seeds off the surface of the berry. And then you don't bury them. What you do is you get some nice, well, okay, the soil mix that we like to use Now our acid mix potting soil is a mixture of pumice rock and peat moss, and both of these materials are considered sterile. We like using sterile soil. I mean, big seeds like the pumpkin seeds, you just put them in the dirt. Just your natural dirt, not compost, just natural dirt. They usually grow just fine, but the more small, tiny seeds, generally you want to start them in a container. We start most of our seeds in this mix of pumice and peat moss. We call it our acid mix, just half and half. What it looks like in a 6-pack. So you just get an empty 6-pack, drop it in there. Now I like to work with moist soil. If you put this stuff in the container dry and you put your seed in there and then you water, everything starts floating and you can't tell where your seeds went. So we like to get the seeds, the soil wet first. So I'll fill these with this mixture, sprinkle it down, wait till it settles, and then put the seeds in at the right height. Now, if they're tiny seeds, we'll just rough up the surface and sprinkle them on top, and then just give a quick shoot of water, which should bury them only, barely. This in good contact, get them in good contact with the soil. Now we put these in the greenhouse because it's humid in there. If you put this, in a sunny window, you might cover with plastic. So we do use, for a lot of expensive seeds, we do use this setup here. So a solid tray. So in the books they say plastic sheet of glass. Well, that's harder for you to get. So just a clear plastic top. And one thing that the plastic clear sheet of glass and plastic top does stops the evaporation. So most seeds sprout best at 70 degrees or higher. And if you've got a tray of moist soil that's sitting there and our dryer is evaporating the moisture, it's keeping it rather cool. You see a lot of seeds will not sprout. I mean, some seeds sprout again at 40 degrees. Brassicaceae family, the cool season vegetables like cabbage, cauliflower, broccoli, they'll sprout at 45 degrees. They're used to the colder weather. But most seeds we have don't like it that cool. And if your house is 70 and you've got evaporating water on some soil and here or some growing medium, it's going to be less than 70 degrees. But if you cover it, stop the evaporation, it'll warm up in there. And if it gets even light through here, even in here, this amount of light, it warms up in here. It's warmer than air temperature because it lets the light in from either the lights or the sunlight from outside, and it gets pretty warm in there. We notice that some seeds don't sprout even at 70. Tomato seeds, at 70 degrees, you'll get about a quarter of these seeds sprouting, which may be good enough since there's about 20 or 30 seeds in here. But if you want them all to sprout, 95 doesn't. And that's where a heat mat comes. Now, when I first started growing seeds, there were no heat mats. So we had these, and I don't even know if these are available anymore, but this electrical plug that's attached to this plastic coated wire. So we just stick this wire in the tray next to our electrical system. So you put the wire in this tray, and you plug it in, and it'll keep it about 20 degrees warmer than ambient temperature, which would be about 90 degrees in here. So we've used these little trays. We fill them with our acid mix or a peat moss perlite mix. And what I would often do with this, well, if you're not using this, you'd have to figure out a way to get this wet. So I would just mix these two together, put them in a clean container, water it, let it drain, and then fill the things. Now, if you're using something like this, the easy way to do it is to load your soil mix in there first, dry, then just place them all in the tray, and then just pour water in the tray, and it'll absorb it from the bottom. And you have to fill the tray about half with water to get all these soaked good. So I let it sit for about an hour so it's nice and moist in there, and then tilt it a bit and let the rest drain out. But always keep, so when I'm starting seeds, I like to see about a quarter-inch to half-inch of water in this tray at all times. Make sure it's nice and moist. I mean, for a lot of, cheaper seeds, especially, April is like the ideal month to start seeds because it's not so cold outside. A lot of the vegetable seeds, you can just start them outside right now, except for tomatoes and peppers. I would put them on a heat mat or in a sunny window. You can go outside if you've got this on top of it to keep it warm. So I would do this underneath trees, so there'd be not full sun because it'll get really hot there in the sunlight, but under dappled sunlight underneath the tree. When I was really young, I bought myself a little cold frame. Just made out of plastic, clear plastic, and it had a little roof vent on it that opened it at about 90 degrees, 80, 90 degrees. It would just open automatically. It's got this little spring that's affected by the heat and would push the vent open. And I had the heating coils in the dirt below the cold frame, and I'd grow a lot of seeds in there. And I had the bottom of that thing just pure sand. So it's sand. Uh, and I put my trays and my seeds in there on top of the heating coils. And then the vent would open up and close automatically. Now we have a big greenhouse. We'll just store these in there. Or this time of year, a lot of stuff we just set it out on the tables in full sun, just like in nature, and keep these moist, and they'll sprout. Now the one thing you have to be aware of is that some seeds are pretty, like these big pumpkin seeds. When they sprout, you can water them. There's no issues. A lot of wildflowers that way, no issues. Some seeds, if you water them right after they sprout, they rot. Papayas are the worst. So papaya seeds, apparently in the tropics, they'll sprout after it rains, but they don't really want a lot of water sticking to them for hours on end in a greenhouse or underneath plastic. This fungus grows, this mold grows right in the stem and it kills them. And a number of seeds do that. So you kind of learn as you go which seeds are most sensitive. So that's why we use this too, because it waters from the bottom. Won't get the stems wet. Once the seedlings are about 3 or 4 inches tall, they seem to become immune to that disease called damp off or that rot that occurs right when they're sprouting. There are some fungicides, maybe the right one. The garden floss we have is supposed to stop damp off disease, so I think some nurseries will spritz their seedlings with that. It's mono and dipotassium salts of phosphorus acid that helps stop the damp off fungus. But if you just avoid getting them wet till they're 3 or 4 inches tall, that works too. Again, most vegetable seeds, no problem. You get them wet. Uh, Start them outside this time of year. Now, the other thing about we usually start things in containers. We notice on farms that they do start certain things in the ground. And it's the cucurbit family, the pumpkin, squash, melons. They'll just plant these seeds right in the farm, right in the dirt. bean seeds will often just start right in the dirt. But you have to be careful. Do know that if you start things in the ground and you're not a farm, you've got a lot of critters that want to eat those things. So when I was, first thing I ever planted in my own garden was bean seeds. So I planted my bean seeds, and in about a week they all came up. And 2 days later they were gone. So I looked at it, came out there at night, and where each bean stem was left, there was like 4 pill bugs on each one gnawing it down to the dirt. So pill bugs, those little roly-poly things, they can't eat mature plants. They're too tough. Their mouth parts are meant for eating rotting things. They love rotting potatoes. I mean, in college, my one of my jobs was to maintain the pill bug colony. We're doing experiments on their genetics and stuff. So I had to make sure they had enough rotting potatoes or rotting carrots to eat. So they like the rotten stuff. But if you keep your garden really clean, there's nothing rotting there, then they eat the next softest thing, which are either sprouts from seeds or flower petals. So so if you plant seeds in your ground, you might want to sprinkle some of this. This is Sluggo Plus, which has got 2 organic materials that'll either stop snails or any kind of insect, pill bug, cutworms. Sprinkle that right around them, or let them sprout and then hit them with this organic spray, the spinosad products, like Captain Jack. Spray your seedlings um, to prevent normal critters from eating them. So the farm, we leased land from a farm for 4 years, and most of the plants they grew, they bought plants already grown from a greenhouse. So the greenhouse growers, there's greenhouse special. In fact, one of my friends used to do that when he was younger. He was a seed starter for the farm. So they would grow their seeds in sterilized sand. So they had these big steam ovens in there, and they would every time they would use their sand, they would then sterilize it and reuse it and start their seeds in that. And they said a lot of the farms did not want these, like the tomato plants we have, they're lush and green. They said those things are too fragile because they plant them with machinery. They use machines to plant those things. So you would have to make sure they were not fertilized, so they were yellow, and they would blow wind on them real hard, so they were really, really firm and stiff, so that they can, pull them out of the sand, send them to the growers, and the machines would plant them in the ground. So he needed really tough seedlings, and he was specialized in doing that. So most farms don't start the stuff in the ground unless it's got really big seeds. So, generally, root crops you start in the ground. Root crops too. So carrots, even though the seeds are small, carrots, turnips, radishes, those things are usually just beets. The seeds are put right in the ground. Corn is usually started in the ground too. So grass crops, wheat, barley, corn, also started in the ground. Now there's other, so this is, we use this plastic. For years, I would use peat pots like this material. They were shaped like this and put them in there. And if they were made out of peat moss, the roots grew right through them. And then you would have to pull them out of the pots. You can just put them right in the ground. But for about 10 years, 20 years, uh, for some reason, our supplier quit carrying anything made out of peat moss because they were promoting coconut coir. I do not like starting seeds at coconut coir. This stuff it's too strong. You cannot get your seedlings out of here. They last too long. And you can't even cut these apart. You have to get these big giant scissors to try to cut through this stuff. It's too tough. I'll try to get the the 6 packs or 8 packs, 12 packs, whatever they have, made out of peat again. I think our supplier may be making out of peat, but for a while, peat was in the doghouse because these people claim this is not renewable or not a sustainable resource. Where how many coconut palms are there in Sri Lanka versus how many peat bogs there are throughout the northern hemisphere in Russia, and northern Europe and Canada. Uh, it was good marketing by the coconut people to tell everybody that peat moss is not sustainable. All this is dead reeds. Plus, coconut does make your plants, it's kind of fresh. Now, this may not do as much as coconut coir. So, coconut coir, the ground up coconut stuff, some people use it for starting seeds. We tried it, and everything we grow in coconut coir, the leaves turn out with an orange tinge. There's something in coconut coir that's, well, it's got to be tannins, which a lot of plants have in their own fresh woody parts to prevent rot and to prevent bugs from eating them. They have these chemicals called tannins, and the tannins can discolor plants if you use sawdust or bark or coconut coir. Try to grow things in that to come out a funny color. So, not that it's, well, it can't be, plant can't be happier with that funny color. Okay, so timing also, some seeds take forever to sprout. Now, the fastest growing seeds we've seen so far, ryegrass seeds. If weather like this, you put these in the dirt, cover them with a little mulch or something, they're up in less than 3 days. So very, very fast. Radishes and that family of plants, broccoli, cauliflower, 5 days. But you want to grow a magnolia tree from magnolia seed, 5 to 8 months. You got to keep that seed moist. So it's a long haul for some plants. Cinnamon seeds from the cinnamon trees, 5 months. Some seeds, the book says, they have to go through 2 winters before they sprout. Now, what's interesting this year is we had enough coolness this year that we're seeing seeds sprout we've never seen sprout in 15 years. So generally, seeds, the weed seeds that come up around here and plant seeds do not need the cold stratification. But I remember the last time we had a winter this cold, which was 2008. I remember that year because our crepe myrtle trees didn't wake up until May that year. This year they woke up in April, which is still late. I mean, um, when we had no winters, 2014, the crepe myrtle trees were leafing out and blooming in January. But this year they're leafing out in April, and that year they didn't leaf out till a month later. So that year was so cold, we saw things come out of the ground that are from the north. So like we grow cotoneaster plants, which are from the temperate climates of Europe and Asia. The seeds normally don't sprout here because those seeds need to be cold stratified. Well, they're coming to Old My Neighborhood that year, 2008. They're coming up. We'd never seen them before growing because it never usually gets cold enough for long enough for them to sprout. This year, you'll see a lot of the same thing happening where things that needed colder will just get growing. A lot of the trees we grow out here, like the ornamental pears along the streets here, yeah, their seeds need cold stratification, but you'll probably see those coming up too. So one thing about seeds, a lot of the seeds, sterility is important. So usually, unless you really clean these good, you don't want to use them again. Now, if they're cheap seeds, like we've used this like 2 or 3 times, it's not that important if they're inexpensive seeds. But if they're really priced seeds, you want to use something that's sterile. with something that's clean. The peat pots and the core pots would be considered sterile too. And then a sterile medium like peat moss and pumice. And again, if it's the pumice, of course, I'll use the perlite for little small seeds. So there's these seed sprouter units that you can put your the seeds that for edible sprouts, alfalfa sprouts and bean sprouts. You can sprout them in these things, but they do tell you got to clean this real good between seeds because if you leave remnants of the seeds in there, mold starts growing in here, and then it wipes out your next crop. So cleanliness on a lot of seeds is real important, real important. So, I was going to mention. So this is off the moringa tree out in front, and this is a seed that's a very lightweight seed that has a bit of a wing or a membrane on it that'll help it blow in the wind better. It's distributed. The most interesting seed I've ever grown. So we carry a vine out here called a sandpaper vine. It's got flowers that have the flowers have bracts and then petals in the middle. And then look at it from the side view, the bracts are shaped like this. And then the little ovary at the bottom develops a seed that's about the size of a small pea. When that is ready to, when it's mature, this whole unit drops off, and these act like little propeller helicopters. You see the seeds as helicoptering away. So I've seen them on my vine drop, and they'll fly about 15 foot that direction and land on the ground. So that's a real interesting way that nature evolved. That whole flower structure is a little helicopter that can take those seeds and get them away from the parents. Of course, you've seen the wing seeds that maples have. A lot of trees have wing seeds. Now, for trees, especially trees that are supposed to be big, like an oak tree, supposed to grow big, we'll try to make sure that their roots do not wind around the pot because you want those roots to be straight. No matter what direction they're going, you want to be straight. If they wind around, so we know that a lot of trees that fall over, the problem is their roots did the circling in the pot. Eucalyptus are famous for that. If the roots circle in the pot, it's like a spring in the ground. They just pop out of the ground and fall over. So they made all these new pots. You can see how this one's set up. There's holes in this placed so that the root, and there's little obstructions in here. So the root, if it tries to circle, it hits one of these obstructions and it's pushed out the hole. And the air root kills the root right there, so it won't circle. So they have pots like this. They have pots like this. So when the roots are heading straight down, they go out the holes, they just stop. They won't turn and come back up. There's too many holes at the bottom of this pot to allow the roots to circle around. Or a pot like this. So this, you can't hold this up and let the dirt's going to fall out. You have to set that down somewhere. But the roots, once they start growing, they just come out the bottom and you cut them off, so they won't circle back up in the pot. There's a lot of ways they do that with trees. Or any other plant, I wouldn't worry about it. If a bush falls over in your yard, it's not a big deal. Fruit tree, even most fruit trees, they're not going to kill you if they fall over. But for the big trees, for when they grow pine trees for the forest, reforestation, they'll use containers like this. Or avocado growers use that container. They just fill it with peat and perlite, put the seed in there, grow the seeds, and they graft them after all for our use. So we've all done this. Avocado pit, a glass of water. I mean, you can. So the seed companies, they do a lot of. They have to test your seeds before they package them up and send them to you because they have a certain amount of germination. In other words, the seeds have to be viable. They have to be able to grow. So one of the ways they do it, they do put them in Ziploc bags, wet paper towel, get them wet, put them in here, and see how long it takes for them to sprout. See how many sprout, and they'll count them. You can start seeds in wet paper towels, but a lot of times what will happen is the roots will go right through the paper towel, and it is a pain to tear that paper towel and get the roots out of there without breaking the roots off. So that's more for the seed company's purpose, or just just for the refrigeration, get them in out of there before they sprout. Because the paper towel can cause trouble with getting with the seed roots. They're pretty sensitive. Now, my friend who used to be the farmer, grow the plants for farmers, he said that the stems of your seedlings are stronger than the roots. So if you do like he did and start them in pure sand, they would always pull them out by their stem once they reach the decent size. Okay, questions today? Yeah.
Okay, the little green or any of those little starter things, you have like 6 or 9 little compartments.
Mm-hmm.
This is a very basic question. How many seeds do you put in each little compartment?
If they're big seeds, we just do one. I would say
Like, okay, so little seeds sometimes are pretty teeny.
right, two.
Two?
Two, I mean, if they're really tiny, it might go three, especially if they're not hurt by being crowded. But in general, most of the average size seeds, not the big ones, we'll put two in each cell. We hate to waste seeds, but and generally, when they're in this size container and the seeds sprout, and you got two in there, you can get them kind of tease them apart and get two plants out instead of just one. So.
Okay, I have another question. You talked about putting plastic. I thought I heard you say maybe you could use a plastic bag, so I don't have a bunch of seeds. Um, can you use like the kinds that are sort of translucent or sort of tan colored from the grocery store, or is that too dark to be clear?
Don't know. You want the light to get in there. If you're indoors, I would probably try to use something pretty clear. But if you're outside on a patio or something, it's pretty bright, translucent. Our our own greenhouse has got translucent plastic on it. It's not clear plastic, and that's bright enough.
Okay, so if outside, you could probably do that, but inside, use the clear bag.
Probably, yeah, I would, or something close to that, yes.
She kind of answered my question a little bit there. When you sprout seeds, do you have to have light? I mean, if you're indoors, do you have to have grow lights and stuff like that?
Most seeds do need light. Again, my oak tree apparently did not. I think that the seeds are used to being buried by critters like squirrels bury oaks, acorns in the ground. They probably go pretty deep, so they evolved not to need light, but most seeds require light.
A lot of light, just a small amount?
Well, they're not getting much in the ground.
Yeah, that's true.
So, but it's, there's some light coming through. I mean, when my daughter set up her room, she had the largest bedroom in our house, but she had all these racks with grow lights and those purple grow lights and the heating mats in each shelf. From the neighbor's house, you can see this purple glow out of her room uh, at night. It was pretty weird, but she was really into growing seeds. So
Can you just touch on the difference between seeds and bulbs? Because bulbs, and relative to the point you were making about the seed having to be flat, but every bulb I've ever grown, they say you have to grow with the plant Going up.
Oh, yeah, bulbs and tubers are considered mature plants, not babies. Bulbs will right themselves too. I mean, bulbs are interesting. You can put them upside down, and when they start growing, they turn right side up. Well, they might stay upside down for the next 3 months, but when they make the new bulb, they make it right side up again. So they do have an up and down. But the bulb growers, when they throw the bulbs in the ground, I'm sure they don't do it by hand.
Mm.
They just toss them in the machine plants them. So what I mean by that, so a lot of the bulb growers, they grow like daffodils make a lot of small bulbs and big bulbs. They sell the big bulbs, take the small bulbs and throw them back in the dirt. I don't think they put them right side up. I think the machine just puts them back in there. So I would think they just right themselves. Yes.
What about like with vegetables? So let's say we grow vegetables either from a plant or a seed or whatever, and then you know how you can let some of them go to seed, or you can get the seed, and then we want to try and save some for next year's season, right? So have you tried like drying the seeds, or is there a process by which you would harvest the seed in a way like we were talking about strawberries or whatever, or even peppers, cucumbers, that we would prepare the seed to let it dry and then get ready for next year?
Well, so if on a plant like say a lettuce plant, you would consider, they bolt and make the flower stalks. And once the whole plant turns yellow, you'd figure at that point the seeds are mature, so you just save the flower stalk. And then when you do that, you kind of have to save it in a little bowl or something to catch the seeds falling out of the
Yeah.
little seed pods in there. I mean, most fruiting vegetables like squash or cucumbers or uh, peppers or tomatoes, that's pretty self-explanatory when the fruit is ripe. Now, of course, cucumbers are not picked ripe,
Yeah.
so you have to wait till they mature on the plants, so they get ugly and brown, and then the seeds are ripe inside. I mean, we've taken a lot of tomato seeds and just dried them. I mean, a lot in the books, if you're doing a lot of seeds, those companies find it a lot of work to dry a seed that's surrounded by gel. A lot of seed companies or a lot of the people who save a lot of seeds, like fruit seeds, they'll put them in a jar of liquid and let it ferment in there for a week because then the seeds separate from their little gel sacks.
Yeah.
Homes, tomatoes, a lot of fruits are done that way. Just let them ferment for a while, and then the seeds drop to the bottom, clean, and they're not in that gel stuff anymore. And then they collect them. I don't know. I've just taken them and dried them and store them that way
Yeah.
without taking.
We're thinking about it because it seems harder to find good 6-packs nowadays of vegetables. I believe we're having a hard